Ancient secrets. The hidden history of humanity. What if everything you thought you knew about human history was completely wrong? Picture this. You're walking through the British Museum, gazing at ancient artifacts, reading the neat little placards that tell you exactly when these civilizations existed, what they believed, how they lived. But what if those placards are missing the most extraordinary part of the story? What if the real truth has been deliberately hidden away, tucked into forgotten corners, dismissed as mere mythology, right? Let's dive into something absolutely mind-blowing, shall we? Something that'll make you question everything you've ever been told about where we come from and who we really are. You see, our history books tell us a rather tidy story, don't they? Humans were primitive hunter-gatherers. Then, gradually, over thousands of years, we developed agriculture, built cities, created writing systems, and here we are today with our smartphones and space rockets. Simple, linear progression, right? Well, not quite. What if I told you that buried within ancient texts, hidden in archaeological discoveries, and scattered across cultures worldwide, there's evidence of a completely different story. A story so extraordinary that it's been systematically ignored, censored, or written off as fantasy. A story that suggests our ancestors weren't quite as primitive as we've been led to believe, and that they might have had some rather unusual, shall we say, influences. Now, before you start thinking this is some crackpot conspiracy theory, let me take you back to a dusty hillside in what's now the West Bank. The year was 1946, and it was about to become one of the most significant archaeological discoveries in human history. Picture a group of Bedouin teenagers tending their sheep and goats near an ancient settlement called It's a typical day, blazing hot, nothing much happening. So what do bored teenagers do? They start chucking stones about, as you do. But when one of these stones gets hurled into the dark mouth of a cave, something extraordinary happens. Crash. The sound echoes back from the depths, the unmistakable sound of pottery shattering. Now, any sensible person might think twice about investigating a dark cave, but teenage curiosity wins out. These lads decide to have a look, and what they discover changes everything. Inside that cave, tucked away in large clay jars, they find a collection of ancient scrolls. Not just any old scrolls, mind you, but manuscripts that had been hidden away for nearly 2,000 years. Over the following years, archaeologists, historians, and treasure hunters scoured the area, eventually finding fragments in 10 more caves. Nearly 900 manuscripts in total. These became known as the Dead Sea Scrolls. Now, amongst these scrolls was something particularly intriguing, a mysterious religious text that had been forgotten by human civilization for centuries. A text so controversial, so challenging to conventional thinking, that it had been deliberately excluded from official religious doctrine. This text was called the Book of Enoch. The Book of Enoch is absolutely fascinating, and here's why. It consists of 5 separate books: the Book of Watchers, the Book of Parables, the Astronomical Book, the Book of Dream Visions, and the Epistles of Enoch. Together, they contain around 100 chapters, and they tell the story of Enoch, the 7th patriarch mentioned in the book of Genesis. He's the father of Methuselah, grandfather of Noah. Yes, that Noah, the one with the ark. But here's where it gets interesting. The Book of Enoch doesn't give us the sanitized Sunday school version of ancient history. Oh no. It tells a completely different story about what was happening on earth before the Great Flood. A story that's far stranger and more unsettling than anything you'll find in conventional religious texts. According to the Book of Enoch, Earth was being watched not by satellites or CCTV cameras, obviously, but by beings called the Watchers in biblical terms. These were fallen angels sent to Earth to observe humanity. But here's the thing. At some point in the distant past, these Watchers decided to stop just watching and start, well, getting involved. The text describes how several hundred of these beings, the Bae Elohim, or sons of God, descended to Earth at a place called Mount Hermon. This wasn't just any old mountain, by the way. It was considered sacred by both the Canaanites and the Jews, who later conquered their lands. Shrines to gods like Baal, Zeus, Helios, and Pan were built on its slopes. The fairy name Watcher suggests beings who observe, who stay awake, who remain vigilant. But these Watchers had a fatal flaw. They abandoned their role as mere observers and began to have, how shall we put this delicately, intimate relations with human women and the offspring of these unions. Well, that's where the story gets really wild. The Book of Enoch speaks of the Nephilim, the children born from these crossings between Watchers and humans. And these Nephilim weren't your average babies. Oh, no. They're described as giants, savage creatures that threatened and plundered humanity. In other words, supernatural, man-eating giants. Now, you might be thinking, come on, this is obviously just ancient mythology, isn't it? And yes, on the surface, it does sound like the stuff of fantasy novels. But here's where it gets intriguing. The Book of Enoch goes into remarkable detail about Enoch's journeys between heaven and earth. It describes how he flies with angels, seeing rivers, mountains, and the very ends of the earth from above. It talks about his role as mediator between the gods and the imprisoned Watchers. But the gods weren't having any of this hybrid nonsense. They were absolutely furious about what the Watchers had done. The consequence. They decided that the earth and all its inhabitants needed to be, well, cleansed. And we all know how that story ends, don't we? With a rather large flood. Now, before you dismiss this as pure fantasy, let me ask you something. How many cultures around the world have flood stories? Mesopotamian cultures had them. The Epic of Gilgamesh tells of a great deluge. Hindu scriptures speak of a universal flood. Native American traditions include flood narratives. Aboriginal Australians have dreamtime stories of great waters covering the land. Norse mythology has its own flood tale. It is almost as if there is some collective memory of a catastrophic flood embedded in human consciousness across completely separate cultures. Curious, isn't it? But what about these giants, these Surely there's no evidence for that sort of thing, right? Well, actually, giant stories are everywhere in human history. The famous explorer Marco Polo wrote about a race of giants in Sri Lanka who were so strong they could carry as much as 4 ordinary men. The people of Madanda, Tangier in Morocco claimed their city was founded by a giant called an Irish mythology tells us that the Giant's Causeway on the northeast coast of Ireland, with its astonishing 40,000 interlocking rock columns, was built by an Irish giant named Finn Mac Cool to cross the sea to Scotland and fight another giant. Ancient Greek mythology is absolutely stuffed with stories about giants. The Norse had their own giant legends. It's almost as if these stories are universal, isn't it? As if they're describing something that actually happened, rather than just flights of fancy. And here's something that'll make you think. The idea of heroes being half divine comes from ancient myths about alliances between gods and mortals. The Greek poet Pindar described the heroes of the past as a race between gods and men. There are references to experiments that led to the creation of monsters by crossing animals of different and unrelated species. In modern theosophical occultism, there are legends about the lost Atlantis, where it's claimed that their scientists bred hybrids, half human and half animal, as a slave race. Records of such events can be found in the mythologies of ancient peoples worldwide, especially among the Babylonians of the Middle East. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. It is said that the story of Noah and the flood in the Old Testament actually originated from Babylonian and Sumerian myths. And around 10,000 BC, there seems to have been a catastrophic event that transformed primitive humanity. At the end of the last ice age, the first signs of agriculture appeared in the Middle East, with a shift from a nomadic hunter-gatherer lifestyle to sedentary agriculture. But here's the million-pound question. Why isn't the Book of Enoch part of the Bible? If it contains such important information about human origins, if it was considered sacred scripture by many religious sects for centuries, why was it left out of the official canon? To understand this, we need to go back to the early centuries after Christ's physical death. Originally, there were UNGs, the 39 books of the Old Testament and 27 books of the New Testament that we know today as the Bible. There were loads of gospels and religious texts that made up the broad spectrum of Christian tradition. As Christianity spread after Jesus' death, the growing Christian church gradually began to choose which texts would be read and followed, which texts would be considered divinely inspired. The church needed unity, and to create it, they required the establishment of an official canon. Now, you might have heard about this process from Don Brown's The Da Vinci Code, where he suggests this canonization happened at the First Council of Nicaea in the 4th century, with Emperor Constantine and other high church authorities choosing what would be included based on their own secret desires and political agenda. Well, Don Brown wasn't entirely accurate about the timeline, but he wasn't completely wrong about the spirit of what happened. High-ranking church members were indeed there, choosing what would be included in the official biblical canon. They debated amongst themselves, branded their opponents as heretics, and almost certainly sought to expand their own power and influence. However, this didn't happen in one particular council. It was a long process that lasted from the 1st to the 4th century. When the process was complete and the Bible was officially compiled, the Book of Enoch wasn't included. But how could something so significant and powerful as the Book of Enoch have been left out? Didn't they know about it? Well, to find answers, we can look at other Gospels that were also censored from the official version. Take the Gospel of Peter, a fragment of which was found in Egypt in 1886. This tells the long-lost story of the resurrected Jesus leaving his tomb, and it includes 2 giant angels and a floating cross. It says, "And they heard a voice from heaven saying, 'Have you preached to those who sleep?' And a response was heard from the cross, 'Yes.' Or consider the Gospel of Mary, an infamous text in which Mary Magdalene is not only mentioned as one of Jesus' disciples, but as his beloved, perhaps even his wife. In this Gospel, Peter asks why he and the other disciples should listen to Mary, a woman, to which Matthew responds, 'If the Savior has made her worthy, who are you to reject her?' Certainly the Savior knows her well. That is why he loved her more than us. These texts were censored, forgotten by many, but they never completely disappeared. There's something deeper behind them, and they're incredible stories, something that goes beyond the familiar and ordinary. The ancient Greeks believed that Enoch and Hermes, the god of wisdom, were the same person. But who was he really? In ancient Jewish legends, Enoch is described as a king over men who reigned for exactly 243 years. He was filled with wisdom, and everyone came to him for advice. According to the ancient Egyptians, Enoch was the builder of the Great Pyramid. The geographer and historian Al-Tabari notes in his work that Enoch was known among peoples by 4 different names. To the Arabs, he was Idris, meaning wise one or ancestor. For both Jewish and Christian theology, Enoch is the 7th of the 10 ancestors, one of the patriarchs before the flood. Enoch was the father of Methuselah, who lived to the biblical age of 969 years. In the Old Testament, in the book of Genesis, Enoch is mentioned in just 5 sentences. We also read there, "And Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him." Just like that, he disappears. In Hebrew, the name Enoch means initiated, enlightened, knowledgeable, and this initiate does exactly that. He ensures that his knowledge doesn't disappear without a trace. The examples could continue, so it's fair to ask why Enoch, regardless of his name, keeps appearing in the traditions of almost every ancient civilization. The answer might be found much further back than the Greeks, Egyptians, or even the Babylonians. Perhaps even beyond the time of ancient Sumeria. According to Sumerian texts, Earth was visited in the remote past by a group of supernatural beings. These visitors are described in Sumerian tradition in a disturbingly similar way to the Watchers described in the Book of Enoch. Instead of Watchers, however, the Sumerians called these beings Anu, which literally means those who came from the heavens. They were perceived as gods by the Sumerians, and according to modern thinkers like Zacharias, they were an ancient race of extraterrestrial beings who came to Earth. Curiously, Sumerian texts tell stories of the Anunnaki, who, just like the Watchers, began to reproduce with humans. In this process, a hybrid race with completely new species was created, known as the Nephilim. Just like the gods in the Book of Enoch, the Anunnaki became angry about the state of Earth and caused a great flood. The same story, told in a slightly different way. As you well know, if you know, it's not the form that matters, but the content. This is the only way we can read the codes of reality. Could it be that the Book of Enoch, like other related traditions, is simply retelling the ancient Sumerian story of the Anunnaki? Or has the same story simply been distorted and reshaped over time to the present day? Not only is the Book of Enoch written in first person, but the author repeatedly affirms his authorship throughout the text, as if he feared that future interpreters would be so limited that they wouldn't understand it. In the first month of the year, 365, on the first day of the first month, I, Enoch, was alone in my house when 2 enormous men appeared to me, the like of which I had never seen on earth. Let's consider the agricultural revolution that began around 10,000 BC, during which humans transitioned from a lifestyle of hunting and survival to agriculture and settlement. According to historical data, by 9500 BC, barley, wheat, rye, oats, peas, and lentils were already being cultivated in lands where Kurdistan is currently located, and goats and sheep were being domesticated. Curiously, the Kurdish people claim to be descendants of the sons of the jinn, or sons of spirits. This is an ancient cultural reference to hybridization between the Anunnaki and human women. The ancient Near East is also known as the cradle of civilization, and the first city-states were founded in the Mesopotamian region. The early indigenous inhabitants of the region, Sumerians and Akkadians, developed the first written language, studied astronomy, and created libraries. They were followed by the Babylonians and Assyrians. In the mythologies of all these races, there are stories of how gods descended to earth and taught them arts and knowledge. In another passage from the Book of Enoch, Enoch bears witness to the mysteries of lightning and the mysteries of thunder. Some suggest that this chapter is intended to illuminate the mysteries of energy and electricity. When we hear about energy and electricity, we can't help but mention Nikola Tesla, who, let's not forget, said, "If you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration." Now, it might sound ridiculous, difficult to believe that such impactful stories as those of the Watchers, the Anunnaki, and the giant Nephilim have been forgotten, the Sumerians ignored, or even deliberately removed from the pantheon of ancient civilizations. The Book of Enoch, along with the Gospels of Mary and Thomas, were also censored from the biblical canon. However, given that these stories fundamentally change our understanding of human history by presenting a new or forgotten perspective on who we really are, their exclusion might not be surprising at all. But perhaps these stories haven't been completely erased. If we look at one of the most famous stories known to humanity, that of Adam and Eve and the Garden of Eden, and if we read the text not literally or philosophically, but as an allegory, metaphorically, God created Adam to watch over earth, just as the gods sent the watchers to do in the Book of Enoch. From Adam's rib, God creates Eve. Adam and Eve reproduce, representing the crossbreeding between the watchers and human women. Adam and Eve were told they could eat anything in the Garden of Eden, except the fruit of the tree of knowledge. Of course, they taste the forbidden fruit of the tree of knowledge, which symbolizes the watchers who bring advanced technology and knowledge to humans, who perhaps were sufficiently mentally developed to handle it on their own. When both taste the forbidden fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil in the heavenly garden, they're said to become aware of each other. Their first realization is that their physical flesh garments are uncovered. They rush to cover their genitals because they understood the so-called serpent power, or kundalini, that can be awakened through sexual acts and non-reproductive sexual acts. They tasted from the tree of life, which initiates the cycle of birth, life, death, and rebirth of human souls, incarnated in physical form. When reading the story of Adam and Eve in this way, it's easy to see the similarities between the story itself, the Book of Enoch, and other ancient writings. And perhaps that was exactly the goal. Maybe those who wrote the story of Adam and Eve were simply retelling the story from the Book of Enoch, in their own way retelling the Sumerian story of the end. Like many other religions and cultures, they inserted this important part of human history, allegorically, into their own religious canon, so that these ancient records could continue to exist through time. And although in a different form, they remind us so that someday we might remember our own history, not in the human way, but through the cosmic human lifeline. So, what is the idea of human history? Is it what we know through officially approved history books? Or is it something deeper, something more incredible, something forgotten? Perhaps the answers have been right in front of our eyes all this time, hidden in plain sight, waiting for us to remember who we really are and where we truly came from. The story doesn't end here, though, in fact, we're just getting started. There's so much more to uncover about these ancient mysteries, these forgotten civilizations, and the extraordinary beings who may have shaped our very existence. What we've explored today is just the tip of the iceberg. There are more ancient texts to examine, more archaeological evidence to consider, and more connections to make between these seemingly mythological stories and our modern understanding of human origins. The rabbit hole goes much, much deeper. And the implications of what we might discover could change everything we thought we knew about ourselves, our planet, and our place in the universe. So buckle up, because this journey into the hidden corners of human history is about to get even more extraordinary. We're going to explore ancient technologies that shouldn't have existed, megalithic structures that defy explanation, and evidence of advanced knowledge that was supposedly impossible for ancient peoples to possess. The truth, as they say, is often stranger than fiction, and in this case, it might be more incredible than anything we've ever imagined. Stay curious, stay questioning, and remember, the greatest discoveries often come from challenging what we think we already know. The ancient world is full of secrets, and we're just beginning to unlock them. Thanks for watching. If you liked it, please like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you in the next video. Bye!